guys, so in this video we're going to take a look at how to create 3D motion graphics in Fusion. And I'm not talking about your average motion graphics, I'm talking about actual 3D motion graphics. Alright, without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so let's get started by adding in a shape 3D. We're going to use this shape as the basis for our spheres. So we can increase the size to 10, zoom out a bit. We can rotate it 90 degrees on the x-axis and then quickly just add in a replicate 3D. Now let's add in a sphere. So type in shape 3D again, change it to sphere, and then pipe this into the replicate. Now if we view the replicate, you see we have a lot of spheres aligned with the plane. So how this is working, let's just go into the scale here first, lower the scale of the spheres. You can see if I just add in a merge 3D now, just for demonstrational purposes, and I pipe the plane into that one as well, and then we turn the plane into a wireframe, you'll see that each of the vertices, essentially where all the lines are crossing, is essentially spawning in a sphere. So if you change these subdivisions, you see we are adding in a sphere as well. So that's a quick overview of how the replicate node works. So let's just delete the merge, and then we're going to have the subdivision set to 10 for now. We can scale up the spheres again so that they are almost touching, but we don't want any clipping here. And then what we can do is that we can go into the jitter tab here. We can increase the translation jitter. We can choose the x-axis, and then we can set that to 20. We can set the y-axis to 10, and we can set the z-axis to maybe 5. So that's a pretty nice randomization of the positions. We can also add some jitter to the scale. We can put it to 1.5 essentially. That creates a decent contrast in the sizes of the shapes, like so. Then let's add in a merge 3D. View that merge. Then we can add in a text 3D. Let's type in something fun like actual 3D. I'm going to just set that to a font that I like, something like that. And then I'm going in under the extrusion depth and I'm extruding it all the way. And then let's add in a bevel as well. Yeah, keep it small. You can also increase the smoothing angle to just smooth out the round parts of the letters. So that's nice. Let's create a merge 3D. We can pipe both of these in. Now let's position the text somewhere that makes sense. So out here maybe, when we can increase the scale quite a bit. I'm trying to keep it from overlapping with the spheres too much. Let's just go ahead and adjust the translation jitter. So just increase it on the x-axis to 22 maybe. Just go into the controls of the replicate, the translation here, and we'll just move the entire thing up to balance it out a bit better. Now let's add another merge 3D. If you want, you could have just one merge 3D, but I prefer to split it up a bit, as I personally find that too many objects connected into the same merge is a bit messy, and I like to keep things as tidy as possible, especially when node trees become a bit complex. So in the new merge, we're going to use this to place our lighting. So we need a spotlight, type that in, and we need a ambient light, like so. If we view that, you can see we have lighting enabled. So we have the ambient light, which is essentially a really low setting. And then we have the spotlight in here doing its thing. So for the spotlight, let's quickly just in the transform tab, enable the checkbox use target. That essentially means that however we are deciding to move the spotlight, it will have the target in the center here that it's pointed towards at all times, instead of having to rotate it manually and move it around. It becomes a bit of a hassle. We should also probably see what we're doing. So let's create another merge 3D and a camera and a renderer 3D. Let's space them out a bit more. Pipe the camera into the merge, and then we can look through the renderer. So I'm just going to split the viewers, and I'm going to view the merge 3D in the left window here. Enable lighting for this window as well. Let's just drag the camera back, and then in the camera, we can actually go into the transform there, and we can enable the use target button in here as well. But for the camera, we want the target not to be in the center of the scene. We want the target to be on the letters, essentially. And we can move it upwards a little bit, something like that. so that the gizmo is in the center of the text. In the renderer, just change the renderer type from software to hardware, and then we can enable lighting. Also in the maximum texture depth, not that we're using any textures, but like it's a good rule of thumb to just put that to float 32, I think. The transparency, you can see that we're getting some jagged edges. So if we change that to sorted, let's go ahead and just position our camera a bit better. So we zoom out a bit. Let's go into the camera node and we can change the focal length to 50, get a bit of a tighter image. Control G to enable the guides, just so that we can see kind of what we're doing. Let's just move the camera to the side and then up a bit. And then in the transform, right click in the empty area here and then just animate transit group to add a keyframe for all 3 values. And then you can go to the end of the sequence. My sequence is 250 frames long. Then just move the camera right, move it forward a bit as well. Then we can move it down so that we get a nice little crane move and we get some parallax with the spheres. We can also put an animation to the translation. Let's make the shot look a bit nicer first. So in the render node, the renderer 3D, in under output channels, we need to enable Z channel, normal, then object ID, and then vector. Once you have all of those enabled, we need to go into the anti-aliasing here. Then we need to disable both the low and the high quality. So the reason we're turning this off is that we want to use all of these other channels to essentially modify the RGBA channel, right? So if you try to modify an RGBA channel that's anti-aliased with channels that aren't, you'll find that you'll get edges that don't match. So there are 2 ways to go about this to fix it. So the hard way would be to essentially anti-alias each separate value properly and then do the effects you want to do. Or you can just disable anti-aliasing for the RGBA channel and then do everything you want to do. And then once you've done that, apply the anti-aliasing on the image as a whole afterwards. So yeah, for this one, we're just going to disable the anti-aliasing. So the first thing we need to do now is essentially to add an ambient occlusion node. We can actually move all of these upwards a bit, pipe the camera into the ambient occlusion. Now if we view this, you can see we are suddenly getting a lot of dimension to our shot. We're getting shadow, which is nice. However, you can see that our lighting effects are missing. So to get that back, if you change the output mode to color, you're essentially just multiplying this ambient occlusion pass on top of our rendered image, which is this one, right? So that's that. Another neat trick, lower the value of the kernel radius. You can see this essentially plays around with the level of shadow. So if you lower that to something like 1.4 to have a bit of a sharper shadow, especially around the areas where that makes sense. And then you can just copy the ambient occlusion node and then pipe the camera into the new one and then increase the kernel radius to essentially add a fuller shadow. So we can do that 3 times. So we can create 3 ambient occlusion nodes. So something like that. So that's the first step, second step, third step, which is nice. Now let's add some colors to this. So drop down a color corrector node and then drop down a copy aux node. And then we can drop down a copy aux node. So for the copy aux, just pipe the original renderer into that. And then if we view it, we can put the aux channel here to Z, and then we can enable remapping, and then we can detect range. And now we are essentially getting a visualization of the C channel into an RGB image. So if we pipe this now into the blue input of the color corrector, let's say we make the color corrector yellow. Now if we go into the settings, we can change the channel here to luminance. And now you can see we're essentially using, let me just split the viewer so I can show you. We're essentially using the black and white values here to color correct the depth, which is really nice. And here is where the aliasing matters, because you're using the information in the pixels to change the values of these pixels. So if this one is not matching, you'll have artifacts like I'm showing you. So this feature here is a really good example of why the aliasing bit is a thing, essentially. Just remove aliasing altogether and then add it after the fact. Let's keep adding some colors here. So copy the color corrector node, pipe the copy aux into the blue input of the new one as well. And then this one, we're going to make it deep red. And in the settings, we're going to apply mask inverted. So that means we have this one, adding color to the front, to the wider areas here essentially, and we have the red color applied to the darker areas. And it's controlled by these sliders here. However, I think the scene is a little dark, and I think that comes down to essentially the lighting here. So what we can do in the ambient light is we can increase the intensity to 0.8 so that we can see what we're doing. Now for the spotlight, let's make some adjustments to the values. So change the decay type from no decay to linear, and then we can set the decay rate. I mean, if you lower this all the way, you can see you're essentially controlling the specular highlights there. So we can set it to something nice like 0.25 maybe. We can also change the cone angle to essentially widen the spotlight so that we get the edge as well. So now if we look at the color correctors, you can see that the colors are a lot brighter and richer, which is nice. However, I want the text itself to be separated a bit from the rest of the scene. So we can create another color corrector node, and then we can also create another copy aux node. Pipe the render into the new copy aux. And for this one, we want to set the aux channel to object ID, enable remapping, and then just hit detect range and see what we get. Now adjust the sliders until you isolate the object like this. So we want the text itself to be masked. So now if we pipe this into the blue one of the new color corrector, settings, set that to luminance. And now we can change this to maybe a bluish color like that. Something like that, that's nice. And you can see that every single pixel is treated correctly. Then all we need to do is add in a nice background. So create a merge, add in a background node, Control T to rotate to switch the inputs. Now for the background, we can change the type to a gradient, and we can change the gradient type to radial, and then we can do something like that. Then for the color, we want the brightest area to be at the top. So just give that top gradient point a value of 0.8, and the darker and the shadow area, put that to 0.7, so that we get a slight shape to the background. You can actually take the darker value and make it colored, make it fit the vibe a bit better and not have it so bland. Something like that. Yeah, that's nice, right? Okay. Now, how to deal with the aliasing. So you can see that every pixel is treated the right way by all of these separate channels. So that's like the desired outcome. However, we don't actually want the image to look like this, right? So what we can do is that we can take the render 3D node, change the image to a 3840 by 2160 image. For this tutorial, I'm going to have my final image output as a 2K image. So like a neat little anti-aliasing trick is essentially to render it out in twice the resolution that you want the final image to be. And then the downscaling of that image is essentially the anti-aliasing in effect. So if we now view the merge here, we are zoomed in now because of the twice resolution. You can see our image is twice the size. Don't you worry about that. If we now add in a resize node, you'll see we have the original image back, and now the edges are fixed. So they are aliased the way they should be. So that's that. So now they are aliased as they should be. So to just quickly add some animation here, we can go into the text 3D. We can go into the transform, and we can add a keyframe to the Y rotation on the first frame, and we can put that to maybe 90 degrees. That will essentially rotate the text for us. And then on the let's say on frame 200, we can put that back to 0. So essentially we're adding a keyframe animation in between those 2 points. So that means the text is animating. So like this. It is clipping, I can see. So what we also can do is that we can also add in a keyframe to the spacing. Also add in a keyframe on frame 200. And then just to click this arrow, and then we can increase the spacing to something like that, so that they're coming together without clipping. So I mean, it's a pretty basic animation, but it gets the job done for this tutorial. Now you can see that the animation is a bit harsh. So let's just open up the keyframes panel here, hit this dotted line, show only selected tools, and then select the text 3D. Just if they are something like this, like super zoomed out and hard to find, just hit this little button here and it'll zoom right in on the layer. So with the keyframe selected, just hit Shift S to smooth them out. Actually, we want the first keyframe to have a linear curve, so Shift L for that one, which means it starts right away, but it ends smoothly. So what we can also do is that we can go into the replicate. In the Jitter tab, we can add a keyframe to all of these, and we do that on the first frame. Then we can go to the last frame and we can just increase the value so that we don't have any clipping with the letters. I'm finding the scale of some of these spheres to be a bit small. So in the Jitter tab, we can increase the scale just a bit to have a bigger contrast in sphere sizes. Okay, so here's me from the future. So I decided to play around a bit more with the colors. So you can see here the colors are the same, but the sliders have changed a little bit. So this is the yellow color, this is the red color, and I'm just making the transition a bit smoother. And then what I also decided to do was essentially put a duplicate 3D in between the replicate and the merge. If we view the merge, we essentially have a bigger amount of spheres, and that's due to this duplicate 3D node. It's just creating one copy, and I'm offsetting it by these parameters. So I'm pushing it out to the back and to the side and up a bit, so that it's filling out the scene where the camera is looking. When it comes to the replicate node itself, I also decided to add a little bit of a rotation to it. You can see here. So on the first frame, the keys have this value, and then on the last one they have these values. So it's rotating mostly on the y-axis, like a barrel roll. It almost creates like a lava lamp effect. So that I just did some quick tweaks. And then what we can do is, before the resize, we can actually create a vector motion blur to use the vector channel as well. Just pipe the original render 3D into the green input of the motion blur. You'll see we're already seeing the effect, especially here. And then the aliasing on top of that. So it's turning into a pretty clean image. So yeah, I think that's it for now. This is the finished result. As you can see, if you are willing to do some tweaks, I think you'll find Fusion to be a quite capable software. I'm gonna call it there. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.